Good afternoon. Hey, listen, I know it's late. I promised to be short. I know you all want to get home and honor your Irish and Australian cousins, so thanks, John. All right. It's a pleasure being here in this mentoring track. Steve asked us to say maybe a few words about how we got started in PSM, and I think mine is, depending upon how you look at it, either a lucky or unlucky story. Steve mentioned I started in the oil patch back when it was booming back in the 1980s. Had one job coming out of college. I worked for the Burlington Northern Railroad, but then I followed my buddies out of college that went to the oil patch to make the big money. So I stayed there until it busted, and all of a sudden this job comes along for OSHA. And I remember I went home that afternoon when I got the job with OSHA, and I said to my dad, I said, hey, listen, I just got hired by OSHA to be an safety engineer. He says, hey, listen, you're going to be good at that. You're a jack of all trades, master at none. It's like, my dad's dishing me on this, okay? But he was sage. Actually, it's not a bad trait to have when you work for OSHA. Now, not all kid grows up and wants to say that, hey, I want to grow up to be an OSHA compliance officer. But I tell you what, the mission is great, all right? I started with OSHA. I didn't plan on staying very long. I got in about a year. I got to do my first double fatality inspection related to an oil patch incident. I was hooked. I've been here for 27 years since. So, but, okay, let me ask you. How many in here consider PSM their primary responsibility? Okay, most everybody in here. All right, so maybe you can follow me as how I started. So I can remember the time. How many of you that just raise your hand can remember when you actually started your PSM responsibilities? All right, okay, I'm with you. So I remember exactly when it was. I'm driving to work, May 8th, 1988. I'm listening to the radio. I'm in Baton Rouge. All right, I'm working out of the OSHA Baton Rouge office. I'm a young understudy. I'm still eager, right? Government employee that's still eager. You got to like that, right? And I hear on the radio, last night the Shell Norco refinery blew up. There's a lot of people missing, and there's a plume being seen for miles around down in southern Louisiana. So I'm thinking, hey, this is my chance. I'm going to go in and tell my boss I want to be a part of the team and get on this thing. So I get in, I tell my boss, hey, I want to be a part of this. And we look around, where's all the senior compliance officers? There's nobody around. So my boss says to me and another young industrial hygienist, he said, hey, you and your buddy head down to Shell Norco, start the inspection. We'll send the recruits or your backup later on. Well, guess what? The backup never showed. That was my start of PSM. So here's the timeline. And here's where I get lucky or unlucky, depending upon how you look at it. So we got the PSM perfect storm, if you will, the PSM dominoes. Back about 1974, we have the event in UK at Flicksboro. It's a PSM incident. It's probably where management change first comes on the radar as a big incident. Then in 1984, we have the Bhopal incident. And then, can that happen over here on this side of the water? Well, guess what happens? Within the next couple of years, Bhopal is a Union Carbide facility. Guess what happens? At Institute, West Virginia, at another Union Carbide facility, another MIC release. Now, this has got Congress real nervous, all right? So all of a sudden, we start looking at a law, a possibility of a PSM regulation coming to fruition. And even back in those, if you think the regulatory climate right now is really bad, even back then, 20 years ago, it was hard to promulgate standards back then. Back in 1990, we promulgated the lockout-tagout standard. Pretty straightforward safety standard, right? Guess what? It took 17 years to get that thing to the point where it was finalized. So things took a long time 20 years ago also. So anyway, we got this Union Carbide facility event in Institute, West Virginia. And then, like I said, Shell Norco, May 8th, 1988. now the big ones are starting to happen on our side of the water. People are getting killed. 7 operators get killed at Shoal Norco. All right? Then, in October 23rd, I believe it was, 1989, Phillips Pasadena. 23 workers get killed in that event. July 5th, 1990, Channelview, Arco Channelview in Texas, across the river here. All right? So now we're up to 1990. It's done. The Clean Air Act Amendment gets passed in 1990. Then in 1992, the PSM standard gets promulgated. And these are just some highlight events, okay? All right? And then we've had many others since then. 2005, we have the BP Texas City event, and many others. I'd like to draw your attention here to, here's a learning for you, all right? Your facility. When I was putting this presentation together, I was wondering, should I put a question mark there? Your facility is next? No. You got to wake up every morning thinking that your facility can be one of these places. Because what we've heard on our inspections after we go in and inspect after there's been an event, and I know from case histories, if you're here on Wednesday afternoon, you'll hear some case histories. We've heard this over the years, like, we never thought it could happen to us. It was going to happen to the other guy, but it wasn't going to happen to us. All right? But when we looked under the rug and we saw the dirt, you know, no, we didn't have the best mechanical integrity program. We thought we were world class. But when we really looked at it, no, we weren't as good as our neighbor across the river. All right? So, take this away. Here's a major learning for today for you. This is not a question mark. This is going to happen to you. And if you keep that attitude and you keep vigilant, good things will happen to your plant and not those things. All right, the PSM standard, all right? It's a performance-based standard, okay? You write down what you're going to do, you say what you're going to do, and you do it. You perform. You demonstrate that you have performed under the requirements of the standard. I think the writers got it right. I mean, this covers all kinds of industry. I think we covered 127 different SIC codes under this standard. So whether you're making chemicals or you're using chemicals like ammonia refrigeration, there's all different kinds of process. It had to be a performance standard. The writers got it right. All right, correct. All right. They also included one of the other pillars at the request of industry, this REGAGAP concept. All right. They originally proposed it like they were going to require some specific NFPA and API requirements. Industry wrote back and said, now, it can't do that. Things change, and it might not be applicable to our plant. And the writer said, okay, we understand that, so we're going to include this REGAGAP concept. This is a system standard, okay? You write it down. You tell us what codes and standards you're going to employ, all right? And those are the ones that we're going to hold you to, the REGAGAP, all right? So that was a big pillar as part of this, where the PHA is a big pillar of the standard, but REGAGAP is major in my mind. We heard an earlier presentation, and we had a panel 2 years ago here at the 6th Global Congress where we talked about some of the gaps in PSM and RMP and what we thought could be changed. Yeah, it's got some warts, all right? We're coming up on a 20-year birthday for PSM. We've had some issues with it over the years. Should some of it be changed? I believe so. I talked about it 2 years ago. All right, we've got some gaps that need to be closed. All right, REGAGAP, well, it's good on one side. Lots of times, some REGAGAP is a little bit more mature, as we call it, than others. Sometimes, if industry really doesn't like the requirements that they set for themselves, guess what? Sometimes they try to lowball it. We've seen that happen. So there's some things that can happen on the downside, but REGAGAP is overall, it's a good piece. Again, you write down the standard you say you're going to employ and use, and then you stick to them. It's a management system. All right. So one thing that I've seen over the years is for the chemical standards, PSM has Whopper, lockout, tagout, confined space. basically, industry as a whole, not everybody, but industry as a whole, you guys accept this stuff as second nature, all right? So I think the message here is, whenever government thinks that regulation needs to be proposed, we hear, the world's going to come to an end. Well, eventually that rule gets enacted, and after a few years, everybody implements it, shakes it out, takes it for a test ride. Over the years, all of a sudden, it's second nature. So if there is ever a new rule coming down the road, the sky is not going to fall. It's probably a real good thing for you, all right? And again, I believe industry, for the most part, has accepted these things. I think these are strong, and you do them daily, and you think this is a good business that needs to be done. All right, what else have I learned over the years? Basically, there's 3 kinds of employers out there. I've heard some people say maybe there's 5, maybe there's 7, but to me, basically there's 3. There's basic bell-shaped curve. Out on one end of it, I put it under the green, we've got the world-class employers. This regulation stuff, it kind of gets in their way. They do it, but they go way beyond it. The culture is great. You walk into their facilities, and it's just kind of oozing all over the place. I mean, you can tell when you walk into these kind of places, okay? On the other end of the spectrum, I call them in the red, the low roaders, all right? These guys don't get it. They don't want anything to do with regulations. They're not going to put up the resources that they need for whatever reason to make their place not only a safe place, but a safe place that can make money. They don't typically understand the business case for process safety. All right, these guys are the low roaders. All right, now we got this big chunk that's in between. All right, and some of the characteristics of the typical employer that really wants to keep a process safe, they understand the case for the business case for process safety. They're not as committed to it as the world-class people, but they understand it. They seem to have an adequate resource commitment for safety. They are committed to the safety of their employees, and they want to do what's right, okay? But here's one other characteristic. I get these calls all the time, or I'll come to a conference like this, and I can guarantee you before I leave on Wednesday afternoon, at least 5 of you will pull me aside in the hall and said, "Hey, Mike, I got this situation here. I can't sell my boss on it, and I think we really need to do it. Can you show me somewhere where OSHA has said that, we need to do X, Y, and Z?" I said, "Well, yeah, I can show you. I'll send you an email. I got an interpretation from, 1993 on that," or something like that. Or, "Now, we don't have anything written, but you can go back and tell your boss that big guy from OSHA who stand up, he said we got to do this." So we try to move safety along like that. All right, so what else we hear at OSHA a lot? The big companies, they say, doesn't happen to us. It's the small companies that have the big accidents. The smalls are making us big guys look really bad. All right? All right. An example, BP Texas City, it's not always so, right? Tesoro event out in Washington, Formosa, Valero. Then on the other side, all right, we got the small guys. They say, "We know how to handle it. It's not a problem. We don't have as much to manage as those big, 300,000 barrel refineries. We got this covered because we don't have as much to manage. So don't bother us. It's the big guys that are the problem." But when you look at the incident history, we got the Concept Sciences. We heard about T2 and West Pharmaceuticals. And you can go read about all these events on the CSB incident sites. So to me, a lot of this, the large majority of this is about implementation. All right? What have we seen over the years? All right, so what typically happens, you have a big event, OSHA comes and knocks on your door, they walk us in, and they go put us in a library till we can get to a person that we need to talk to about, opening conference and getting out in the facility and start the inspection right away, because we got a big incident here. And we'll see library shelf after library shelf of engineering standards, procedures. All the paper's there. It might not be all pristine paper, but for the most part, programs are in place. All right? Engineering standards are there. All right? So what happened? Why is that place on fire and I'm sitting in here? All right? It's implementation, execution, and maintenance. Heard it several times today already. Call it something different, but it's execution and maintenance. Do what you say you're going to do, and do it. And keep doing it. All right? Not meaning to pick on BP here or anything. You got a couple of incidents here with BP, but it could happen to you. That's the takeaway. It's going to happen to me. That's why you need to be vigilant. But I read a couple places related to the Deepwater Horizon event. It's a 10 to the minus 7th event, rig event. All right? 10 to the minus 7th. That's a lot of zeros. Very small probability of this thing ever happening. Do I have to do anything else? Because it's already 10 to the minus 7th? Well, maybe not, but guess what? That assumes all those systems that's making that a 10 to the minus 7th event are being executed and maintained. If they're not being executed and maintained, that 10 to the minus 7th keeps dropping, 10 to the 6th, 10 to the 4th, 10 to the 2nd, until something happens. So the old broken chain model about incidents, all right? Maybe if one of those links are broken, one of those systems works, maybe deep water doesn't happen. All right, I don't know if Mike Broadrib's in here, but I'm stealing one of his slides here from a presentation he did just a couple years after the 2005 Texas City incident, and it's busy. I'm not trying to point you to any detail on this thing, but it's the old Swiss cheese model he put together, all right? And basically, the take-home from this is we've got all these different safety systems in place, all right? Then we have all these different barriers in place, but he documents like 34 different contributing factors or broken systems that lined up that eventually led to incident at Texas City. Lack of execution and maintenance. All right? Lack of execution and maintenance. All right. Heard a little bit about this earlier. All right? I guess the term nowadays is one-off incidents. All right? We had an incident. I don't know how this happened. This never happened before. Most cases, yeah, it has. All right? In almost most cases, yes, it has. All right? There's a few one-off incidents. Probably the one that I can appreciate most recently is this, what industry has learned about storage of flammable liquids, overfilling tanks, and guess what? You can have unconfined vapor cloud hazards from these things. All right? We saw that at Buncefield. We saw that at Caribbean Petroleum down in Puerto Rico. There was an event over in India. So that's kind of a new hazard that's surfaced. All right? Industry really wasn't in tune to that. But guess what? Most of this stuff is not new. All right? All right? Jack mentioned Trevor Kletz. We got his whole What Went Wrong series. Tremendous learnings there, as he says. All right? The last point on that, Herb Rosenthal, who was a board member with the CSB, he was giving a talk probably late 90s, and he says, guess what? 90% of this stuff has happened before. We keep doing the same thing over and over. We have to learn, and we have to change what we're doing. And when I heard that, I was like, I want to go up and hug this guy, because I've been sitting on this, stewing on this, since probably like the early 90s. Saying, I keep seeing this thing. I got this old binder from Manufactured Chemists Association where they were putting together synopsis of accidents that had occurred in chemical facilities probably back from the late 50s into the 60s, back before they would document those things because they weren't afraid of getting sued, I guess. But there's all these incidents in there. It's like same thing over and over and over. So the takeaway here is we need to learn. It's there. There's resources there to learn from. Take those back to your facilities and incorporate them. John says facility siting is important. It's absolutely important. This one especially for me. I've been to Shell Norco. This is back before DNA, where they had to bring in the FBI fingerprint analysts to identify some of the operators. I mean, what happened at Shell Norco was an 8-inch overhead line from a depropanizer column failed, and it actually was oriented such that the vapor pointed right down. There's this massive vapor cloud over the top of this old masonry block control room. All right. And 90 seconds later, it ignited, and it just literally rubbled, if you will, the control room. All right, 6 of the people that died in that event were in that control room. Another guy in another block control room was coming out of that when that one failed and killed him. All right, Phyllis, Pasadena, 23 people killed in that event. All right, old block control room kept building and building, and more congestion. The major congestion confinement events as far as Pasadena and Shell Norco event went. 2 trailer events, all right? Pennzoil, Roseville. This happened back in 1995. That tool trailer, 5 people got killed in this event. 2 of them were welding on a tank. 3 were in and around this tool trailer. This is one of the good events, all right? Because for whatever reason, 10 minutes earlier, there was a break going on. All right, this tool trailer was part of an expansion in the storage tank area that was in and around where the event occurred. But anyway, 10 minutes earlier, there was a break going on, so there was about 40, 50 contractors that were in and around this trailer. Break got over, fortunately. They all went back to work and were out of harm's way, except for 3 of them that were working in and around the tool trailer, and those guys got killed. That trailer was, vaporized. And then we have the trailer incident at BP, Texas City. So it's important. It's very important. All right? So, but the good news is we've made significant, progress as far as facility siting goes. All right? We're seeing a lot more blast-resistant structures, whether they're temporary or permanent. We're moving and replacing trailers. We're depopulating, and we're removing non-essential workers from structures that they don't need to be in. All right, so that's good news. We still got some problems out there. All right, we still got that old block control room. Guess how we're protecting it? Risk analysis. All right, we got BDLs of 4s, high 3s and 4s. All right. We're protecting it by risk analysis. We don't like that, all right? We see, going back to the first rounds of PHAs back in the early 90s, where the facility siting on some of these control rooms, well, the first one said, we got us a problem here, all right? Then the next one said, we got a problem, but we need to study it. Then the next PHA said, well, we didn't do the study, so we need to do some more study. And today, it's still there, and it's still being studied. So we got to get some resolution on these things. If nothing else, make sure the easy ones, like removing non-essential personnel out of the area, get that done right now. PHA is another good point. For those of you that were around for the first rounds of PHAs, they were kind of ugly. All right, this was a new tool that was coming on board for a lot of people. All right, but with each successive round of PHA revalidations or complete redos, they're getting a lot more sophisticated and they're getting better. So that's the good news. All right, we still got some problems with some resolutions. All right, your PHA team goes out and identifies a problem, gives it to the employer, but guess what? Things don't get done. Sometimes these are pretty easy too. low-hanging fruit stuff, we call it. And for whatever reason, they don't get done. So go back to your plant, take a look at your list. What do you got that's outstanding? Get that taken care of. My colleagues this morning gave a presentation on are your credits worthy with respect to PHAs. Lots of times in PHAs, we still see some questionable safeguards. All right? Let's take a look at those. An interesting question got asked out of that paper, too, is like, one of the things my colleagues challenged the audience on was, hey, listen, we want you to think about your safeguards. You know, are you sure they're going to be available when they're called upon to act? Are they maintained? You know, has operations been done? You say that relief valve is one of your safeguards. When was the last time you did a PHA, or when was the last time you did any study on your relief system? 20 years ago? A lot of changes been made? All right, so the question to my colleagues was, well, you don't expect us to go back and validate all of our safeguards. Do we have to do that inside the PHA, or can we do it outside the PHA? Well, it's a performance standard, okay? How you want to do that, that's up to you. OSHA's expectation is, though, that when you take credit for that safeguard, it's going to do what it's designed to do. That's the answer. So whether you want to call it you got to go back and validate all your safeguards, fine, that's fine. But the bottom line is you have to perform. Perform means that safeguard's got to work. All right, we do have time. Okay, all right. Exceptions. Okay, as many of you know, in the PSM standard, there's several PSM exemptions. All right, myself and my colleagues, we spend a whole lot of time on the PSM exemptions. All right, but that's fine. That's what we get paid for. We take care of that. What keeps me up at night are the exceptions that you guys take. All right, go back to the Phillips Pasadena event, prime example. All right, if you remember, it was related to a pipe reactor, all right? And coming off the bottom of the pipe reactor were these, on each one there was like 6, what they called settling legs, all right? Because of the design of the operation, lots of time these settling legs would get clogged up and the polymer would solidify and they'd have to take that leg out of service, okay? So now that leg is not producing product anymore, all right? So what Phillips had to do was, okay, they bring in a maintenance crew, all right? They'd close this one isolation valve, all right? They'd open up the bottom of the settling leg and get that polymer log. It was an actual polymer log by the time they'd get it out and take that out. Well, to do that, all right, they couldn't use the Phillips lockout, tagout general safety procedure, okay? They had to come up with their own settling leg exception, all right? The settling leg exception, one of the options was to shut down the reactor and do the job. Guess how many times that happened, all right? So that doesn't happen. So they use this exception procedure, and obviously one time the risk got too much and something happened and we had a major release. 90 seconds later, big vapor cloud, all these people in and around these control rooms, 23 people get killed. Right. So exceptions keep me up at night thinking about it. I hope they keep you up at night. So really, what are we talking about here too then? Nowadays we call them MOCs, something different from your regular procedures. Think about them. Think about them a lot. All right, something else that kind of I've seen over time is we go into a facility and they tell us, well, we've got 2 PSM covered processes and we got 5 that aren't covered. But don't worry, Mike, we got it covered because we treat those non-covered processes just like our PSM processes. You do? Are you sure? is it really more of a goal? All right? We've seen cases where it turns out it's a goal. All right? Now, are you required to treat those non-covered processes just like your PSM process as far as OSHA is concerned, complying with the regulation? No. Are you required to have a safe process? Yes. All right? So if you're going to do almost everything for a non-covered process as you would for a PSM covered process, go the whole way. That's what I'm trying to tell you here. All right? Example. Back in 2001, at a BP polymer facility in Augusta, Georgia, 3 operators got killed. All right? Non-continuous process, batch processes, and every time they had to start up or shut down this reactor, they'd have some off-spec polymer that they'd shoot to this little catch tank. All right? Pressurized catch tank, catch pot. And every once in a while they had to open up this catch pot and clean out all this old polymer so they had room for the next batch. All right. One time what happened was there was about 40 bolts on the head of this catch tank. They got about 20 of the bolts off and the thing blows off. You know, big release. 3 of the guys get killed, and there's a vapor cloud ignites, big fire. Turns out that there was a decomp reaction going on inside of this catch tank, and built up pressure. And guess what? This polymer had solidified around the radius of the inside of the catch tank. Right? Oh yeah, there's lines coming out of there. There's vent lines. There's relief lines coming out of this thing just like there should. But guess what? That polymer is just going to gum up those lines, right? So one of the safe. Okay, let me ask you this. How many of you in here, if you consider your local pressure indicator on a vent line a critical safety instrument? Anybody? Nobody? Guess what? The operators at this place thought it was. Aren't those guys the people we should be asking? Because guess what? Before they open up, take those 40 bolts off the head of that catch tank, they're looking at that local PI for pressure. It reads 0. Why did it read 0? Because it was all gummed up. No pressure could get to it. All right? To them, that was a critical instrument. That kept them alive. But guess what? We don't really look at it lots of times. You got to go out and ask your operators. All right? So this was not a PSM covered process, but it wasn't safe either. And we talked about incidents. You got opportunities to learn. There were all kinds of different opportunities to learn prior to the big event that happened here. There's looking at the inside of that catch tank, and you can see the yellow. That's the caked up polymer. CSB says it measures, depending upon each time they open up, anywhere from 3 to 5 inches along the inside of the vessel. We heard this before. Personnel safety, hard hat safety does not equal process safety. All right? Big event happens. Lots of times we'll have people that come in and talk to the head of OSHA and say, hey, yeah, we had the big event, but, our injury rates are way below the national average. And that kind of gets him real fired up because he understands that, process safety and employee safety aren't necessarily the same thing. All right? It's not an excuse. It's one thing I learned. Okay?
What is it? That's 811?
The first 3 big incidents that I went to, Shell Norco, Phillips Pasadena, Arco Channelview. What did they all have in common besides they blew up and they were big disasters? Does anybody know? They had a great personal safety record. They all had signs at the front gate. This blew me away. They all had 1 or 1.5 or 2 million man-hours without a time accident. Back in the early 90s, I'm asking myself, where's the disconnect here? Because, as we've learned over time now, is personal safety does not necessarily mean you've got good process safety. So my last slide here is the safety car analogy, okay? We're all in process safety together.
Check one.
And him too. We got the front seaters, okay? We've got the employers and we've got the employees. The employers have at stake their workers' safety and health and their financial interest. We have the workers who've got their well-being and their livelihoods at risk. And then we got the rest of us. We're the backseaters. We're the regulators. We're the CSBs. We're the associations, CCPS, IIAR, the consultants, the suppliers, everybody else. We're all in this together, all right? It's a journey. We got to work it together, and that's it. And here's my colleagues. If you guys ever got questions, we definitely pick up the phone. We take emails. We'd be glad to hear from you. And we'll take some questions.
Well, here's your chance to ask any question you might want of the knowledgeable OSHA expert here, so please take advantage.
Don't be loud.
Probably not. Okay, I'm loud. If when you have incidents that are not PSM covered, do you just claim it under general duty clause? Is that how things go, or?
You're asking about enforcement?
Yes.
If the question is, if there's an incident at a non-PSM covered process, how would OSHA handle that under enforcement? Well, if there's no it may be covered under another standard. Number one, all right, like our 1910-106 standard, all right. If it's not covered under any standard, but yet there's a recognized hazard that can cause serious death or physical harm, all right, we might now be in the neighborhood of issuing general duty clause violations.
Any other questions? No. Well, with that, I want to thank all of you for attending, and I want to pay particular note of thanks to our exemplary speakers today. I think they deserve another round of applause.